Hi, I'm Sophie Wilson, and this is People of the Pool, where we have conversations with those making a positive change in Liverpool's business community. We're known for our music, for our culture, tourism, and of course, football. But what's caught my eye since moving back from down south is the innovation and entrepreneurship that's happening in the city region. And this podcast is about championing just that. I'm blue, not red. I don't have a purple wheelie bin, but I'm still a proud Scouser, and I can't wait to share the stories of positive, inspirational changemakers with me. In this episode, we meet Dan Davies. Dan is the CEO of Rockpoint Leisure, a private sector development and regeneration company who have completely transformed the Victoria Quarter in New Brighton. Dan has also recently been reappointed as the chairman of the Institute of Licensing. Dan, welcome to People of the Pool.
Hi, Sophie. Okay.
Hi.
Thanks for having me on.
It's an absolute pleasure. And obviously we're including Liverpool City region, which includes the Wirral. It's not just the city of Liverpool. So just in case we get into any arguments about, about that.
Yeah, you might want to tell the city region that it includes New Brighton as well.
Excellent. So off to a controversial start. So Dan, tell us all about the regeneration of New Brighton that you masterminded. What was your kind of background and inspiration for it?
The background really is growing up in New Brighton as a kid. So, and a lot of people from the city region would have, sort of my age or older, would have fond memories of coming to New Brighton, in the summer and going to places like New Brighton Baths and things like that. So I was born in 73 and that I grew up, sort of like, my streets in New Brighton around the 80s and then going into the 90s, obviously. But as a kid, the 80s as a decade was quite a mad one because we started the 80s after the winter of discontent and Liverpool was, the whole region was really suffering like a lot of the country, but particularly, places like Liverpool. And there was a lot of strikes and things in the in the early part, and a lot of desperation and hopelessness as well, really.
Yeah.
So growing up in New Brighton, at that era, there wasn't much hope, and that if you went to university, you never came back. We didn't really retain talent, and that we didn't attract new talent in. Sort of my generation, very much it was seen as the end of the heyday of seaside towns like New Brighton, and that the harsh sort of like realities of decades of underinvestment, not just in New Brighton, in the whole region, really made it a place where you were either just going to exist or get out of, and a lot of people wanted to get out.
Yeah.
They lost a lot of talent, from places like that.
Yeah.
So that's really the backdrop of it. I started a business in New Brighton when I was 18, and that it was a training company because we were all running bars and things. So I was the licensee of a bar in New Brighton, and that it was a gap in the market that we saw, and we created from a mate's flat a company which ended up growing over the decades to the biggest provider of education and training in the hospitality sector and a number of other sectors. So we grew the business. We never really always wanted to stay as our head office on the Wirral, so we ended up having offices in places like abroad, like Limassol in Cyprus, and we had one in Ankara in Turkey, but we had about 250 staff who worked in Birkenhead, and we grew the business, training, education, and latterly, a lot of IT, to a global company. So we were operating in about 28 countries.
Wow.
Training about 4 million people a year.
All headquartered over the water.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So really the regeneration was when I was looking at the next chapter of my life, what I was going to do. I didn't want my whole life to be defined by sort of training and education and CPL. So in 2018, I made the difficult decision to step away and sell the company. And I sold it over a 2-year period. And that although I was living in London, between London and New Brighton, every time I came back, and I've never, obviously I lived in New Brighton, but I never forgot where sort of I came from.
Yeah.
And seeing it increasingly sort of spiral downwards, I drink in a local, pub there. And you just saw, as every month went on, different businesses closing, getting boarded up, more antisocial behaviour, fly tipping. And like a lot of places, I live just up the road from it. And some of my neighbours and things, very, very wealthy. 2 minutes down the road, you've got, poverty. And that's the same in a lot of places around the UK and in America and places. So, in the shadows of buildings. I mean, I remember being in LA, a Standard Hotel, and just looking out on the rooftop there of like Bank of America and Barclays and everything. And literally in the shadow of that building was like Tent City, like something out of Mad Max. I'm not saying it was that bad in New Brighton, but certainly there was they'd done a brief, it had a brief renaissance when they did a development on the promenade, which was sticking plaster stuff, but the rest of it was pretty much left.
But just to go back, Dan, because you mentioned New Brighton as being a place to go. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, I'd go to the fair there, and there was go-karts and it was great. But further back, New Brighton has a fantastic history. It certainly didn't used to look like that back in the day, did it?
Yeah, it was. I mean, going back sort of pre-1830, it was a series of sand dunes, just sand dunes, and it was called Rockpoint. That's why I called they did regeneration, sort of like Rockpoint Leisure, and a guy called James Atherton, who lived in Everton, used to look over the Mersey to Rockpoint, which was these sand dunes, and he decided to go over, buy the land off a local landowner, go down to Brighton in the south coast, and come back up and form a New Brighton of the north. And he had some amazing plans, and really that kicked off the whole development of New Brighton. In its heyday, we used to get over 5 million day trippers coming over just from Liverpool on the ferry. We used to have 2 piers at the end of the road, the main area that we operate now. There was 11 theatres. It's got the longest promenade in the country, but we had the largest ballroom in Europe.
The Rialto?
No. But this was the Tower Ballroom,
yes.
So we had Little Richard, the Beatles played there more times than anywhere apart from the Cavern. 27 times they played there. The Rolling Stones. You could seat about 3,500 people for a meal there. That's how big it was. Gosh. And on top of it was sited the biggest building in the UK, biggest tower in the country, bigger than Blackpool's. We also had the largest open-air swimming baths in the world, New Brighton Baths. Another large Lido down the other end of the promenade, Derby Pool.
We had 2 Lidos.
Yeah, the Derby Pool. And it was Lord Leverhulme who built the promenade and New Brighton Baths, Unilever. Lord Derby built the Derby Pool, and a lot of people invested down there, and they had a whole host of things to do, and it really was. I mean, at that time, obviously the British seaside was popular, and it was before the 60s. We had package holidays and things like that, which was the start of a decline for a lot of seaside towns.
So from sort of its heyday as a post-Victorian day tripping destination to the kind of deprivation of the 80s and you seeing this spiral, what happened next? Because obviously today, walking down Victoria Road, there's a very different story which we'll get to. But so talk to us about that journey of regeneration then.
When I grew up, a lot of the buildings were derelict down there. So the bottom half of Victoria Road, which is the main high street, was all old concert halls and theatres and cinemas and venues and things and shops and it was the traditional sort of high street, the butchers, the bakers, the candlestick maker, and I've got a list of every single shop that's ever been there since 1890. Wow. And like the greengrocer that's there now, Ian, that's actually been a greengrocer since 1890. He's been in there about 43 years. And that when it was all getting closed up, they demolished New Brighton Baths in the early 90s and they'd replaced it with a Morrison's supermarket. So and a number of other sort of mid-tier sort of brands. And that was hailed as this big, fantastic sort of regeneration. What they failed to understand is that New Brighton is a place where you don't pass through, you have to go to.
Yeah.
So it's got a population of about 15,000 people. And that when the piers have gone, when the buses service is gone, when, you know, when all the compelling reasons to go, let's have a weekend away or let's visit somewhere like New Brighton. When you get rid of the ballroom, the tower, the 2 baths, the piers, your theatres, and you've just got boarded up places. The sort of stick-in plaster stuff that we did on the front, I'm not against all of it because there's some good stuff there. It's good to have the cinema. It's good to have some traditional stuff at the seaside. But also, it's not a compelling reason. You don't go, I know, let's go for a weekend away because we can go to Home and Bargains and Costa and Morrison's and just a load of crap like that. And the other thing is, I mean, I'd be backwards and forwards to Liverpool. You could eat healthier in Euston Station in London than you could anywhere around there. And the other thing is, so people, you know, people under the misguided perception that they had a choice. You know, we've got a bit of a choice now in New Brighton with this development that happened in the late 90s. He didn't. He had a choice of what they got given as a choice. So, for example, we got a Hungry Horse, not a Miller and Carter, a Burger King, not a Nando's, a Travel Lodge, not a Hilton. And these are all decided by people who sit in offices in London or New York when they're deciding what to roll out brand-wise. So the actual choice is by them, not by the people that they serve. And also, I don't believe they always get it right.
Yeah.
So fast forward to sort of 2018, why I decided to start doing something is when I walked down the street and just looked and think 60% of the street lights are out. Everywhere steel shuttered up and boarded up. There's, you know, a few businesses hanging in there. And the model for where it was going was already the other end of the street, which had been compulsory purchased, bulldozed, and then some houses put in. So already half the street was gone.
Was gone, yeah.
And the things that were hanging in there, I thought that we've got to protect at all costs. So when you go, we had a greengrocer for Spain there. We had a pharmacy, an optician's, post office, convenience store.
All the community amenities.
Now that is, you know, that's a base for a high street that you need.
Yeah.
But I also was looking at a lot of the other, you know, problems that high streets have. And one of the biggest issues I see with the high street, obviously the out of town stuff that decimated a lot of high streets. But the problem is, if you were all blindfolded and parachuted in just about any high street in the UK, bar a few, they all look the same. They've just got the same brands and everything.
Yeah.
And when a lot of stuff went online, a lot of them pulled out. Some of the brands went, you know, bust. So it was a case of protecting what was there. And that's when, you know, I got together with a couple of mates and we said, well, let's buy, rent or lease every single boarded up place. And then let's get the kids together who are causing problems. You know, and mainly they're not bad kids, they're just nothing to do. So in the summer holidays, while we were trying to convert them and do something with them, we basically got the kids together, got them in high vises and got them clearing up fly tipping, painting lampposts and sanding down benches, clearing up the basic, you know, the basic, you know, street sort of furniture.
So you literally went round and found scallies hanging around with nothing to do.
No,
you got them in a...
it's just all the local kids and stuff like that. We were just hanging around with, you know, looking for something to do. And rather than just get into mischief, you know, actually do something. I said to them, you know, do you want to live in a dump of an area or do you want to try and turn it around? And I spoke to the
receptive?
shop owners and things and said, look, we don't want to compete with you. We want to compliment you. At the moment, the footfall and things, it's in a terminal decline. If we want to reverse that, you want to arrest the decline, well, we've got to do something. We've got to make it a place where people do want to come to. And there was a number of, key things that I was looking at. One, we've got a lot of talent with music, with art, with people who wanted to start businesses. And after running CPL for 30 years, I know the amount of talent that we have on, in the region, in the city region. And that it was a case of giving a platform for that talent. So, that involved us engaging with primary schools, secondary schools, colleges, universities, offering some space, some seed investment in the early days for some businesses, and really doing something that was trying to make an ecosystem where people would want to stay and they would want to relocate to. Because it's actually, the position of New Brighton, a lot of seaside towns, half of it's in the water, half of it's on land. It was when I was in New York at a conference that I was in Brooklyn, and I was looking and thinking, actually, we've got a good position here because we're just like Brooklyn to Manhattan. There's just a river between us. And if you start looking at it like that, the connectivity we've got in the city region is great. There's loads of, opportunities. I used to go down to London live in London 3 or 4 days a week. It's 2 hours, 10 minutes on the train.
Yeah.
So it was to be honest with you, I started this whole project because I was just pissed off at how it was going down there and how we'd already lost so much that you were basically just wiping your feet on the way out if it was that continuous decline.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if we hadn't have done something in 2018, the rest of the road would have been compulsory purchased and they would have just stuck houses there.
We've created People of the Pool podcast with the support of the team at Bengo Media. Dozens of businesses, large and small, turn to Bengo Media to get their podcasts up and running through their training, consultancy, and even hands-on production. And right now, Bengo Media is offering you, People of the Pool listeners, free online training to help get your podcast launched in 90 days. You'll get insight into the steps to take and some of the biggest mistakes to avoid. So, to claim your free online podcast training from Bengo Media, go to podcastschools.com now. That's podcastschools.com. Well, let's fast forward to now, and what I'd love to do is to just sort of paint a picture, particularly for listeners who maybe even in the Liverpool city region who haven't been and seen what you've done there. Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. I mean, I've been there now a number of times. So I live in North Liverpool. So I've got to drive into town and go on the Mersey Tunnel, drive around to New Brighton. But I keep going back because of what you've done. And it's not just visually, it's tangible in the air, people talking to you, the sense of community. Can you explain to listeners what it looks like now on Victoria Road?
It's still got a long way to go, but art was one of the things. So we started paint. We were the first people to paint any sort of murals on the walls on the Wirral. So we started bringing some national and international artists in who collaborated with local artists. I remember somebody saying at the start, you should only use local artists. And I said, that's an interesting concept. Can you imagine if Glastonbury said that they were only going to use artists from Somerset when they started? And also gives opportunity for people to work with some big names and get experience. So there's a lot of murals, all different types of artistic sort of expression. We've clustered some stuff together. So your likes of Rockpoint Records, we've got a vinyl record store there, a sort of cafe bar venue, and we've got tattoo parlour, barber shop, some art studios on the top floor. What we try and do is maximise the space in these buildings. And it also gives opportunity for people to start a business with no lease, no big ingoing or anything like that. They can go in, have a space and try and build a business from there. We didn't want to run everywhere, but we wanted to help placemake and curate a sort of ecosystem with all the other business owners that people would want to come back and people want to dwell time down there. We opened an art gallery, Oakland. We've just done a successful sort of 3-week exhibition with a lot of homeless people who have created some amazing art.
Wow.
And we've just displayed that in Oakland. That was... I thought it was important to bring something like an art gallery to a high street because a lot of people see art as quite exclusive, and that also some of the galleries that you have are quite intimidating for people to go in, and just having one where you could just walk in was great. And we've had a load of artists there. We took over a supermarket, which was a purpose-built quick save. Then it was Summerfield, then it was Co-op, then it was Budgeons. I mean, it lay derelict for about 6 years until we got the keys, painted the whole thing black in about 6 days, ripped all the fridges and everything out of it, pretty much to make sure it was never made to supermarket again. And then we had bands like Space and we had public meetings there. We had a lot of charity stuff. And that was a fantastic time. Obviously, COVID and lockdowns have really, held back a lot of things. And the hospitality trade's been hit particularly hard. But we've taken over, we opened a restaurant, we opened some outside areas, we've opened a pub, we've called it James Atherton, which was obviously the founder of New Brighton, although we did do a name change, calling it the Three Bell Ends when we did that, and that was Matt Hancock, Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings. So we changed that for a while, which got a bit of publicity and a bit of flack. So that's it. And we've got a load more plans. We've got 3 bank buildings. So we've got no banks on the road. We've got a bus stop, but no buses stop at. And it has been so badly underinvested that it was a case of just once you start, you get a lot of buy-in as well, just from a residents and everything, just when they see the area improving. And also, people were sick to death of artists' impressions of what might happen in New Brighton in the local newspaper. But they just didn't believe anything was going to, happen. And I think a lot of it is just a case of rolling your sleeves up and doing it.
I mean, I have to say to listeners, I used to live in Brighton in Sussex, and Brighton is well known for its mural, street art, famous graffiti, independent shops, thriving cultural scene. And I remember the moment I turned onto Victoria Road and saw the graffiti art, saw the murals, saw the cafes full of elderly people talking together, having tea together. And this was at a time when, coming out of the pandemic, a lot of elderly people have been isolated. But when you go to New Brighton, you feel the sense of community. I mean, you've put... Is it the UK or the world's largest outdoor art gallery you've created there?
UK,
with an art map. I took my stepdaughter and we went round, we looked at all the murals, which actually nod to local heroes as well, don't they? And the fabulous history. And
some of it's abstract, and some of it is, and we give a fair amount of artistic freedom too. And art is about a talking point. Some of it should be a bit of a slap in the face and a wake-up call. There's some amazing talent. Artistically, we've got some brilliant artists who are in New Brighton who have really come on and developed since they've been mixing with, national and international artists. We've also got a huge vibrant music scene. So we've got some real success stories coming out of New Brighton and the area around. So your likes of the Mysterines, Leah and George used to work behind the bar in Rockpoint Records. They're doing a world, they've done 2 big tours of America and Europe. They're doing a world tour of the Arctic Monkeys for a big stadium tour. We've got likes of Dream Machine, Mambido Blue, Razzmatazz, people like that, all coming out of the area, and it's and we're working with the art and music departments in each of the colleges and schools and things like that. So it's really about developing that sort of talent and realising, when I grew up, a lot of people you had to get out of the area.
Yeah.
So we lost some brilliant talent. Brilliant artistic talent, your likes of Mark Wardle, who, moved down to London. He still comes up to New Brighton. He's from New Brighton. He's got a studio in Shoreditch now. Aidan Hughes is over in Prague, and another incredible artist.
Yeah.
But when they were growing, they were, a bit older than me, and when they were growing up in New Brighton, there was just nothing there,
Yeah.
So,
but thanks to you and, rolling your sleeves up and getting stuck in it. It's very different.
I've just been the sort of crazy one who sort of like kicked it off. It's actually been, there's an amazing amount of people that have helped us out from the brilliant teams we've built, but also just local residents and people, who have really, helped out and rolled the sleeves up. But
you fostered that sense of pride, and it is very evident. I mean, when we were looking at the murals, a young lad comes out the house and talks us through the stories. It's, you have interactions with people on the street in New Brighton, and that's palpable. We haven't got loads of time, but, I just wanted to ask a couple of quick fire questions, really. I mean, obviously, this has been a huge undertaking, largely self-funded, self-projected. I mean,
we have had a lot of support from the council and the city region. Yeah, we've spent about £7.5 million, and they've given us 4 new waste bins on the road and £3,000. I don't know how we could have done it without them, so I'd really like to thank them for it.
So, I mean, exactly, this is really a community-led, person-led approach to regeneration. I mean, if you were mayor for the day, what would you change, or what would you? Do you have a message?
Of where?
Well, exactly, city region. I guess we're now going up to the metro, aren't we? But
yeah, quite a lot.
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to. I'm probably best not saying anything here, not being too controversial.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot. I would change a lot.
Well, maybe,
and I would invest in things instead of there's basic stuff that they should do. But there's some great stuff going on in the region. Love Wavertree is a brilliant little regeneration and community group. After The Guardian wrote an article saying Wavertree is one of the worst places to live, they just got together and thought, fuck this, no it isn't. Let's try and do something about it. And they started at a grassroots level, just doing some stuff. And I think these are the sorts of projects that need proper, a tiny bit of funding. There's too much spent on consultants.
Yeah.
So the easy port of call for councils and metro regions, let's employ a consultant, to tell us to put one step in front of another. And most of them aren't from the area. It's a boilerplate, off the shelf. Oh, this'll do. Just change the name of the last town or city that we did. Yep. Yes, you do need some consultancy. We don't need to consult about everything. I mean, they seem to want to delegate everything apart from the salary.
Yeah.
So there's quite a bit I'd do. But I'd really look at some grassroots projects there. Community, and also you can have a lot of people repeating the same thing, cluster some together.
Yeah.
A small amount of money spent upstream saves a hell of a lot downstream. And actually, whether you're a mayor, whether you're elected council or civil servant, the decisions you make today affect people's lives for generations to come.
Yeah.
When they're in the shit over latest budget or whatever it is, which they're always in every metro, in the whole area. But the easy thing is to kick the can down the road and just to eat into reserves or to do stuff. But all it's doing is storing up more problems.
Yeah.
Spending a bit up front makes a huge difference downstream.
Absolutely. And I think New Brighton's become
and when
a
they
model.
sell stuff off, you can only sell it once.
Yeah.
And then you've lost it. And when you knock buildings down that would be there in another 100, 200 years and replace them with some breeze block and glass box, which will be replaced about 10 times, but rather than renovation is always more expensive than knocking it down and building some hideous monster in its place.
But it's worth it you just look at the Albert Docks for that. You know,
exactly.
They were going to. Well, listen, Dan. Just one more. You know, you're an incredible man. You've been on an amazing journey particularly in the last few years. What does the future hold now for you personally?
Well, I'm 50 in about a month. So.
A big party.
The biggest fight I've got on my hands at the moment is to keep this going in New Brighton. I'm in the House of Lords in about a week's time, giving them an update because I went down to the House of Lords and did a select committee into the future of seaside towns, and we actually came out the top model. That's it there.
New Brighton. Wow.
Yeah. Again, the council. It didn't bother even responding to it, but we came out number one. I'm giving them an update, sort of 5 years on what's been going on.
Okay.
So my focus is to absolutely 100% focus on New Brighton and keeping this going. At some point, I'll be taking a step back. Nothing can be based around one person. I could never have sold CPL. It was just about me. I had an incredible team around me. Of directors and people who had shares in the business, and that's part of a £9 billion company now. So I will gradually take a step back over the next few years, and it'll be the next generations, your Rudys, your Wills, the bands, the artists, the operators down there that'll take it forward.
Excellent. So one last question. If you had to name Rockpoint Leisure with the name of a Beatles song, what would be the most appropriate?
To date, probably Hard Day's Night.
Excellent.
Hard Days and Nights.
Fantastic, Dan. So one main point to kind of take away, if there was one very quick piece of advice or main key point that you want listeners to take away from today's interview, what would it be?
Don't forget where you came from.
Love it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, where you grow up, where home was, because it's very easy, especially if you make a few quid, to leave and never return. There's people who aren't as fortunate or aren't in that position. And I think the one thing about New Brighton is potentially it could be replicated. There's some base things that could be replicated in virtually any town and city. And that I met a lot of people over the years in, big cities around the world who come from similar places. And if you're in London, it's very easy, and you've got the government that think the north is Islington, where they just forget about large swathes of the country. And I just think that if you do get out, always go back.
Fantastic. Dan Davies, thank you very much for joining us on People of the Pool. Cheers.
Ta.
If you want to find out more about some of the amazing things that are going on in Liverpool City region, go to www.tuesday-media.com/People of the Pool. People of the Pool is presented by me, Sophie Wilson. Until next time.